আরেকটু হলে ভালো হয়। ঠিক আছে?
Hello. Yeah, on the very rare occasion do we have a triple century. So we are talking about 3 centennials today. Three from 3 distinct parts of the country, 2 of them from one field and one from some completely different field altogether. Yet, a few points connect all of them. Right? A few common threads connect all 3 of them. Shamya, my first question to you is, 2 incidents in Ritwik Ghatak's life had a deep impact on whatever he did in the, the grown-up part of his years. What were those 2? 2 incidents.
I thought you were going to tell me.
No, you are the author of the book, so I think you know it better than anyone else, or editor. 2 incidents, the big 2 incidents.
So obviously he was born in 1925, like the 3 people we're talking about, or 1925-26, which would logically mean that you're in your late teens when, speaking in the context of Bengal, when the war happened, which perhaps, and I'm not an expert on that subject, affected Bengal a bit more, perhaps, than most parts of India, which of course was followed by the famine, which we call the Great Famine. I don't know. I mean, that's the magic of the English language. It was certainly not great for Bengal or Bengalis. And I personally feel the effects of it. We are still seeing, if you walk around Kolkata, you still see the effects of it. So those were there, of course, and that was followed by the partition of India, which some of us like to say was really the partition of Punjab and Bengal, and which is perhaps accurate, which was followed by communal riots. So it's a 10-year, or the effects of it linger even now.
10 years of horror.
10 years of horror, if you want to call it that, that affected various people in various ways, different people in different ways, perhaps affected Ritwik Ghatak a bit more deeply and personally than it might have other people. I'm not comparing or anything like that. Might have affected, or he might, who knows, just have been a weak man who couldn't deal with it. We don't know. But, and he had the avenue to express it as a theater person, as a writer, as a filmmaker, which is what I suppose gave us what at least some of us feel are great masterpieces.
See, he crumbled later. We'll come to that later. But curiously, the Bengal famine was also a turning point in Professor M.S. Swaminathan's life, right? Something opened his eyes to a whole lot of things. Can you talk about it?
Thank you, Balaji. Incredible panel. Mala puts together the best people from the most interesting fields together. I'm the odd one out here because I'm talking about an agricultural scientist who gave us food security, and these are luminaries, and families who've kind of redefined cinema, which is, again, another passion in India. 2 things in India see democratic kind of uptake. One is food, the other is films. So I think in that sense, this is only a panel. Mala kuthinga, oh Mala shunche na. আমি মালা করে বলছি. Now, yes, Balaji, back to you on your question of, the Bengal famine. In fact, M.S. Swaminathan was training to be a medical doctor when the Bengal famine unleashed. And he said that India didn't need another doctor. We had several doctors. What India needed was somebody to kind of solve her food security issue, simply because we weren't growing our food. And the Bengal famine didn't happen because of a failed rains, or we didn't have enough crops. It was a political diversion by Winston Churchill's government, and it was a deliberate famine. And it was, it's called a murder by many other names. Of course, if you lived in England and if you study colonial history, they don't know anything about it. And there is no claim on India's suffering. And you mentioned the word, the Great Famine. I think that was also coined to a large extent by colonial historians. There was nothing great about what happened to us. In fact, my grandmother, I went through it, and I remember her telling me, I'm part Bengali, part Tamilian. I grew up in Bengal. She said, there are people knocking on their doors to say that, Didi, ekto pan deben, which was starch, which is the leftover rice. And she says the soil of Bengal never forgot. In fact, even years later, when she'd recount the story, she'd dab her eyes because she said that, we never forgot. And that actually changed generations of Indians, whether it was their food habits or even their own bodies. Because the bodies which went through the famine came out, the next generation genetically paid the price for it. When Professor Swaminathan saw all this sitting as a young medical student, 2 years into his medical, science degree in Chennai, in Madras those days, the Madras Principality those days, he said that we needed to do something about it. He said, what could I do? At the same time, Quit India movement had been declared by Gandhiji, and Gandhiji went up and said that for the poor, God is food. So he wanted to do something about the food situation, and that's when he said that, to hell with being a medical doctor. And of course, it upset a lot of people, but what we needed to now do was to actually solve her food security, because he said for an agricultural nation like India to die like this, drop like flies, 3 to 4 million is the official estimate. Unofficially, there'll be many more. He said, I don't want to live in an India which will see this economy anymore. So he wanted to change that. So yes, the Bengal famine is a running narrative, I suspect, all across.
Yeah, thanks for that. Nasreen, Guru Dutt was far removed from the Bengal famine or the partition of Bengal or the Punjab or whatever. Still, that noir sort of genre of movies which he came out with initially, Bazi, Jal and other things, what brought about those? What caused those?
Well, I think in film terms, to be realistic, it's opportunity. When you have a producer turns around and says, look, you can make a film, which was Devanand, and he says, you can make this film, and Balraj Sahni is going to write the script, and you're just going to work with him, and Balraj Sahni, then they all go and see a Hollywood movie called Gilda with Rita Hayworth, and come back and think, yes, it'll be great to have a character like that, and they cast Geeta Bali. To be honest, we have lots of romantic ideas about how films are made, but often it's just opportunity and timing. If you're in the right place in the right time and you've got this fever to make movies, you're going to make movies. And for him, that was what drove him. He was always passionate and completely obsessed by filmmaking. He was, unlike your story, which I find fascinating because I've heard so much about cinema, not about your world. And so I really, really enjoyed what you said. I mean, enjoyment isn't the right word, but I'm informed by what you said. I think that, for example, in Pyasa, he does talk about famine because there's a whole scene in which he's sitting and he can't afford to buy food. So he's sitting in a restaurant and then Wahida Rahman character, Gulabu, comes and gives the money for his food because he thinks he's paying for this food himself, but actually it is a rich man who gave him a coin which is counterfeit. And the restaurant owner says, ye to khota hai. Yes. And so therefore there is a question of famine, and he's aware because he was brought up in Bengal. In the 40s, he was in Bengal, so he was very well aware of what was going on and the history of Bengal.
Do you think his mixed identity, a Kannadiga, spending time in Bengal, then moving here and there, did that mixed identity create a sort of an inner conflict in him that made him move from Jal and Bazi and all those movies right into Pyasa, the sort of the tragic movies?
I don't think. I think the strength of Hindi cinema, at least the past one, was this mixed identity. Okay. There would be, he was Konkani speaking, and he knew that the films had to be in Urdu, so he gets an Urdu writer, Abrar Alvi. Then he knows that the best cameraman is from the south, from Chennai, so he gets Murthy Saab. So every time a big work is made in cinema, it is usually a combination of people from many disciplines.
Yeah. To strike a little bit more balance, I know we love praising everyone. Shamu, it's not about numbers always, but 6 flops out of 7 released films over 24 years. What went wrong? Why couldn't people accept? I know he's considered a great person now, Ritwik Ghatak, but numbers do tell some story, right? Not the full story, but some story.
Actually, 7 flops out of 8.
No, the one didn't release at all during his lifetime. I'm discounting, I'm taking it out of denominator. So 6 out of 7, yeah.
But it's quite the opposite of what Nasreen said about Guru Dutt, isn't it? Opportunity meets A, B, C. Because in his case, either he was a terrible filmmaker, which is what was probably said at the time, I don't know, or the reason he made films was completely different from, say, the way Ritwik Ghatak and many others, especially in the mainstream, but even otherwise. In what I was at a panel a couple of days back, and I think it was Meeta Vashisht who said popular art cinema. I loved the usage. It might be in circulation, but I hadn't heard it before. So in his case, obviously the films were very personal, which, again, Guru Dutt, the later films, what you call the tragic films, might have been similar. But his films were, and this is my conclusion to what you said, is he was making films about a terrible tragedy or the fallout of it and trying to tell that story to people who had suffered from it. If I had gone through the famine, if my family, 50% of the people had died or whatever, and my home, I've gone from here to there or there to here, etc., etc., do I want to see that on screen also? A. B. Hardly anyone in Bengal had money at the time to go to the movies. Of course, I went to other movies, which is fair. But so in Ritwik Ghatak's case, there are some other things too, and I don't know if we have the time and space to talk about it. But the expulsion from the Communist Party, the falling out with, which made the Communist Party his enemies. And they played, and these are stories I've obviously heard during the course of making this book. They would go to the theater. They would send people to go to the theater and hoot with laughter at the tragic moments and cry when someone's being funny, which was very rare in Ritwik's films, but there were not too many funny moments. But they disrupted his screenings again and again. And there was almost a lobby that worked to put him down, put his work down. And this is fairly well established. I'm not just leveling accusations or allegations. This is all fairly, and the political cinema of the time certainly didn't go well with the Congress government, which was obviously the critique of partition was a critique of the central government of the time.
Correct.
And I'm not a party person or anything like that, but this is fairly obvious that certain things happened in that period that apart from the British, the only powerful Indian political powers, which was really the Congress, was to blame. And all these things, I suppose, plus of course, to be fair, the denseness of his subjects, the excessive, perhaps, individual touches, which didn't make them easy viewing. They're still not easy viewing, even after all these years of experiencing cinema from around the world. It's not easy viewing. It's not supposed to make you comfortable. It is tough viewing, and it's gritty and in its own way, and it's tragic.
Yeah, so that's why they are good from an academic standpoint. But yeah, it's still difficult to view. Let's take Kagaz Ke Phool, something that links Ritwik Ghatak and Guru Dutt, or the autobiographical element, showing your personal problems to the world. I don't know how many care for your personal problems, right? I don't know, that's the rule of the thumb rule. Kagaz Ke Phool, people talk about it in great terms. I found the underlying theme very flimsy. If you get caught up in your personal problems between two women in your life and you neglect your work and start making rubbish films, Suresh Sinha had it coming. So why would he blame the world for that? I thought, that's my opinion, but...
But it's a bit maybe surprising to you, but I agree with you completely. It is not one of my favorite films. I think
not at all.
Very self-indulgent. And you want to know, what does he want? What does he want? He divorces the wife. He doesn't accept really the woman he loves, who's the Vahida Rahman, the actress character. And then Johnny Walker takes out 40 minutes of complete nonsense going on. I think it's a very confused film. What works for that film is 2 or 3 songs and their characterization. Waqt ne kiya kya hansi sitam. So everybody says, oh wow, Kagaz Ke Phool. And what do they show? They show a clip of a song. It's not a story. But I think the world is coming to an end. Maybe Guru Dutt didn't
He approves of what you're saying.
I don't know whether it's an approval or a disapproval, but
must be thinking,
we were making our points in the most candid way.
I'm very pleased you think so, because it could be Guru Dutt thing. But
Two things I promise you. We'll be very candid, right, about what you're going to say. And second, we are not going to hold up your Saturday dinner. So wait for it. We'll come to a quick and sharp conclusion. Priyambada, in 1948, or late 47, 40, we came within hours of losing Kashmir, right?
We've come close to losing Kashmir many times as well. Later, we just don't publicize it.
And in 1960s, we came within weeks of starvation. And MSS rescued us. Yes. What did he do?
Not weeks. We were days away from starvation.
It's even more scary.
1960s India was very different from the India we take for granted today, where we stand in buffet lines and waste food, or with wedding food, perfectly edible food gets thrown out and you don't do anything about it. 1960s India was, in fact, independent India was born in hunger. Pandit Nehru, I still remember MS telling me, very clearly that, you know, we grew up with the Tryst of Destiny speech of Nehru's being flashed on every screen, but what you didn't notice at the bottom of the page was the fact that there was hunger persisting everywhere. That narrative got lost. That narrative came alive in the 1960s when we were reliant on food grain imports from the US. But when the US gives you anything, they really don't give it to you for free. They take an arm and a leg for it, and in those years, it was called conditional diplomacy, and Mrs. Gandhi was fed up. She had to dance a jig to Lyndon Johnson's not-so-musical tune. He'd call her and say, oh, you put out a statement for Vietnam, you put out a statement for Pakistan, we are going to withhold your shipments 200, 300 nautical miles away from the Bay of Bengal, where you used to be a ship-to-mouth economy. You'd have ships laden with food which came in, and they used to be dispersed within hours. So she finally turns to MS and says, you've got these magic seeds you've been talking about. How soon can you give me 10 million tons? Because, Swami, I'm tired and I want the bloody Americans off my back. She looked at him, he looked at her and said that, ma'am, if you give me 2 years and 5 crores, because we need to import 18,000 tons of seeds from Mexico. That was India's largest seed shipment. That was actually the world's largest seed shipment. Mrs. Gandhi said, I'll give you all the support you need, but her cabinet disapproved. And there were a lot of problems, but MS stood his nerve, and so did Mrs. Gandhi. And the next bit was taking these magic seeds and getting the farmers to approve of them. Now, you can have a set of seeds in your pocket, but if the farmer's not going to plant it in his fields, nobody's going to buy it. So 7 weeks of going around in the heat of Delhi, Jaunty, which was near Haryana, all farmers turned around and said, paise doge to beej ugayenge. He used to turn around in his broken Hindi. Don't forget, he's a Tamil Brahmin. He's working, in the searing heat in Punjab. He says, we don't have money, but मैं वायदा करता हूँ कि these will actually work, and you will have double and treble the kind of, grain that you've seen. 7 weeks later, one intrepid farmer turns around and says, okay, I'll take your seed. He said, what changed your mind? I've knocked on your door. This is the 3rd time. He said, because you're coming on a Sunday. You're not getting paid to do this. You're obviously not, the government will only pay you money Monday to Friday. You obviously believe in your product. He said, hum kar lete hain, hum try kar lete hain. That one farmer's small leap of faith was India's leap of faith into food security. We had so much grain in the 1960s, in the mid-1960s, that schools had to be freed, opened up. Hospitals and waiting rooms were, and school waiting rooms, had to be filled up. Schools were opened up to store that kind of grain because the land was actually vomiting the kind of grain which we hadn't anticipated, and we didn't know how to store that grain. So a lot of it got lost as well. So when that started, by 1971, Mrs. Gandhi formally ended the Food for Aid program which was called PL 480, which was signed into law many years ago by Dwight Eisenhower. And we were formally able to rescue ourselves. Now, food security is important for one major thing. The Green Revolution is known as India's food security issue. But I think more than a nourishment strategy, it was a defense strategy, because without food security, Mrs. Gandhi wouldn't have been able to liberate Bangladesh. We wouldn't have been able to fire off Pokhran and Smiling Buddha, because we were no longer dependent on America. If you can't grow your own food, you really can't call your shots. And that is exactly what happened.
Exactly. Tremendous contributions. Let's talk about the women in their lives. For a change, we'll start with Shamya. I know I've been bowling the first bouncer at you. I'll give you a break now. Nasreen, he was in conflict with himself, with his wife, with the other woman, with everything. What was, give us an inside story of how his life with Geeta Dutt was. She was a support factor. In fact, when he came out of his suicide bid, the unsuccessful suicide bid, the first thing he wanted to say in the hospital is, where is Geeta, or whatever. So what was it? What was her role? What was her role in his life?
I was asked a similar question earlier today, because there's a lady who is writing a book about Wahidaji, but I wasn't there. I have no idea really what was going on. But I will say this, that those were the days when mental health was very badly, poorly understood. So if he was distraught by a dozen things, they would always pin it's got to be the woman who's to be blamed. So they blamed a lot on the women in his life and thought he was a great artist and all, which he was. But the fact of the matter is, it was a time where mental health issues and being bipolar, being depressive was just not understood. And it was simplified to a very specific kind of relationships between men and women. And I don't believe, I mean, there's the whole question of his suicide and so on, but I don't believe you really commit suicide out of love for someone. It is out of either self-hate or disgust or being fed up of things. I don't believe somebody else can make that happen. So there are different forms. Like with Ghatak, I think, personally, I think he was also driven towards something that he couldn't grasp. And Guru Dutt was always searching for something he couldn't grasp.
Exactly. Shamya, another sad story, right, of Ritwik Ghatak and his wife.
Oh, yes, it was. Perhaps not unlike any other marriage where alcohol, tears it asunder. But obviously, I mean, we're talking about him, so yes, of course, it was a terribly sad story, especially for the children, 3 of them. But Nasreen is absolutely right. I mean, she said those days, we weren't really aware of mental health issues till 10 years back or 15 years back, till it became as mainstream as it has, at least in India. So in Ritwik's case, it's moderately well documented that what I mentioned earlier, the expulsion, the rejection by the audiences, the failure of his cinema, and all of that, and this entire period from 1962, which is when Shubhanorekha was made, but it was released 3 years later because of censor issues. So 62 to 72, when Tita Shekti Nodinam was made, when he couldn't make films. I mean, no one gave him money to make films. And he was basically jobless, saved by the FDII stint, which he lost. Drink again.
And he was thrown out of the house by his wife. Not
the
allowed
throne.
entry or whatever.
I think he first went to, I've forgotten the sequence now, he was in hospital, he was in mental hospital, which his wife put him into. So it's not like he was not cared for. I mean, that was the best solution at that moment in the world that they lived in. And then he was kind of on the streets in his last 3-4 years. But again, alcohol killed him, let's say. Of course, it was illness caused by but what drove him to alcohol is interesting, because he died at 50. Till he was about 38, 39, he hated alcohol. He hated the concept of alcohol. And he looked down upon people who drank. I don't know why. That's another matter. But he was a teetotaler. He smoked an enormous amount. But he hated alcohol with a passion. So he obviously drank so much in those 10, 12 years that he died. But what drove him to it is obviously frustration, obviously rejection, obvious mental health issues caused by frustration and rejection, and so on. So, yes, growing up in Calcutta in the 80s and 90s, you heard about Ritwik Ghatak, oh, he drank himself to death. He was an alcoholic. But what caused it?
That's putting it too simplistically.
Yeah, what caused it? What caused Guru Dutt to, kill himself? That's the problem, right?
The issue, yeah.
The issue is not the pills or the alcohol.
A very, very different story, right? Between Professor Swaminathan and his wife. Yeah, very different story.
Happily, yes,
your aunt, Swaminathan's wife was really,
actually, I do think that, it takes, for one person to be this colossal, it requires a sacrifice of many people. And, atypically, I think, in India, it's always the women who are expected to sacrifice. I think that was also the case with MS. He had a very supportive wife in my aunt. And he always claimed that, his life couldn't have gone these stretches without her magnanimous sacrifice. She was an economist from Cambridge, was part of the planning commission. But she quit it all because his life required, when he was out for hours, planting, getting those seeds tested or planting them, convincing farmers, working with Norman Borlaug, trying to kind of combat every bureaucrat who came his way. She had, she held the house. But I do think that, even for her, what seemed like an halcyon kind of marriage, they had a lot of struggle in the sense that, there were times I'm sure she resented him for being they had 3 young girls who they had to raise. But in effect, yes, he lived for 98 years. So not again, a victim of suicide or self-harm or, any other unrequited love problem. I actually, honestly, Nasreen, there have been people who've been wanting to turn this film into a book because of, India's, the book into a film, yes. Turn it into a film. And, they look at the fact that, this talks about India's food security problem. And, it plays out in the background of America like we are facing today. But everywhere they ask me, was there anybody in his life, who could, spice things up? Because the Bollywood filmmakers come looking very despondent that there's no, second person, third person, some scientist somewhere, some farmer he might have taken a shine to. I always have to disappoint them saying that, there are no sordid love stories or anything that tumbles out of closets that I can give you. Because he really had a rock-solid marriage. I'm sure it was qualified. I'm sure that kind of love that they had, was tested many, many times. But he was the product of a his parents were very happily married. His father died young, but he himself had a very long and successful marriage. And I think that was very, very instrumental.
Hello. Yeah, exactly. But even the father of Green Revolution can have detractors.
Oh, several.
Name 1, 2.
I'll give you 4. I'll give you 5.
You're waiting to go to dinner. 2.
Ready to go to dinner? I'll give you 1. If dinner is, we talk about food. So if you talk about food and dinner, then I'd rather not keep people waiting. Now the point is, the Green Revolution has been critiqued on many fronts for being, a Frankenstein which MS unleashed. He was aware of that, but we needed that Frankenstein. If he didn't, Mrs. Gandhi would have still been, tugging the phone lines and her knuckles turning white in rage listening to the ramblings of American presidents. And, we are still in that situation today. We listen to the ramblings of American presidents and we keep ho-hum and we say nothing in return. Mrs. Gandhi was different, made of, her métier said that, she had to do something and take a stand, so she did it. And MS was her foot soldier who delivered that food security issue. But when the Green Revolution was unleashed, it was a fertilizer guzzler, which means carcinogenics went into the land. It was a water guzzler, which means that, any government which came after that and they gave kind of free electricity subsidies. How do you win elections? You give subsidies. Yahan pe paise le lo, ye muft hai, wo muft hai. At the end of the day, zameen aapki chali jati hai. The whole land is then, there's salination, the water table is over exhausted, and you're left with land which is completely bedraggled at the end. It was a short-term solution. So in 1968, he turned around and said, look, I'm very worried that the Green Revolution is now morphing slowly into the Greed Revolution. And that's where he started his notion of the Evergreen Revolution of production in perpetuity without ecological harm. And he was one of the very first people to call out, the climate change issue 40 years before it was actually launched. And he did his best. But yes, he was also accused by many kind of leading scientists of saying that, you've caused harm not only to small landholders, because, fertilizers could only be afforded by the rich landholders. So the smaller landholders came and said that, this was essentially for the bigger landowners and bigger farmers. And there was a case of a suicide in the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, and that has also been played out in my book. He had more than his fair share of detractors. Vandana Shiva makes a killing out of him every day when she talks about the fact that he's called the father of cancer, because he introduced that into the food chain. But if you didn't have food security today, and of course, there is a huge chemical imbalance. The food we eat today is very different from what we had historically. But without that food security, we wouldn't be in this economic position we are here today. So it was a double-edged sword. It was a short-term solution, but it could have been managed better. But don't forget, any management requires policy support. And after that, Mrs. Gandhi lost her elections.
Yeah. So that's a legacy of MSS, very well documented in your book.
Thank you.
I think you should pick up a copy of that. Nasreen, of course, I have read many of your books, and I'm going to start reading one more, which you presented to me. Thank you very much. You become what you make. Devanand once said he was a young man. He should not have made such depressing movies. What a contrast, the two friends. This man didn't care. He just kept on making movie after movie. He couldn't even stop with Awwal Number and all that. He just carried on with life, as if it would never end. But some lasting legacies that Guru Dutt left behind, of people after him who carried on that and they're still there. Name a few.
To be honest, I don't think anybody really they've been influenced by Guru Dutt, by their understanding of music or something like that. But in terms of the cinematic language, I don't think there's anybody who has really followed Guru Dutt's style. They say that, but it's not true. It's not true because what the French call an author, which means to say that every line and every shot and every moment of a film is seen from the point of view of one mind. Even if 20 people deliver that, it is one mind that chooses what they take from each person. And Murthy always said that Guru Dutt had a jeweler's eye. He knew how to pick the diamonds. And I think that's a very beautiful way of putting it. He got the best out of people. And therefore, it's very difficult to get that kind of team. Mr. Ray had it here, and I think in his own way, Mani Ratnam has it. But I don't believe many filmmakers do. Mani Ratnam has a lot of respect for Guru Dutt, but he's not making those kinds of films. But it is to do, I would say, to be very brief, it is to do with your relationship as a filmmaker to your craft, to your instinct, your imagination, and to your craft. If you have these three things aligned, you make exceptional films, whether it's Godard or Fellini or Bresson or Guru Dutt. You make something different because you've aligned all these aspects of filmmaking.
Yep. Did he lose a couple of opportunities? See, Woman in White became a big hit in terms of Wokanthi. That was Madan Mohan's turning point. If he had carried on with Raz, it would have become a big hit as well, since it was an adaptation, because he never wrote any more screenplays after that, after Kagaz Ke Phool, right? So this adaptation, Chaudhary Ka Chand, worked. So even this would have worked. Who knows? He might have been the one to give the break to R.D. Varman. You know, that could also have been a big thing that he could have carried on as a legacy. But did he miss a couple of tricks? Did he go too much down under after Kagaz Ke Phool? Things happen.
Balaji, that's a nice question, but I would say that when he made something which he understood to be very personal, you put your heart in it and he makes Kagaz Ke Phool, and the audience hated it. So when that happens, he was shaken, and he thought, what I understood is he thought it would be very unlucky if he signed a film. So the next film he makes is Chaudhary Ka Chand, and he gives it to Sadiq Sab. And then he makes Sahib Bibi Ghulam, and he gives that to Abrar. So he actually started feeling his name was somehow cursed. He had personal inner demons. And if he rejected a film, he started many films and then he'd say, forget it. I think that's very good, because that means he didn't believe in it till the end.
He didn't believe in it. But again, Raj Kapoor, just to digress, Raj Kapoor turned things around. You know, Mera Naam Joker, which is also autobiography, crashed badly. He came back with Bobby, with the same team.
Yes, but then Bobby was written by Abbas Saab. So he goes back to someone who he worked with in Awara. So it's who your team is. In film, it's your team.
It's your team. But pretty much it was the same team. He got in a couple of new faces, but it's pretty much the same team.
Pretty much the same
pretty
team.
Much the same
and
team.
Mr. Ray as well. Pretty much the same team.
Pretty much the same team always.
Because you have a shorthand. And once you have the shorthand, you will always work with the same people. If you've got a great driver, why are you going to get another driver who doesn't know how to turn left?
Right. Shammo, the legacy of Ritwik Ghatak. I know we've been talking about it all day, and well deservedly so, no doubt about it. Okay, your book is very well documented. I've gone through that, the anthology. I think I would recommend a read of the book.
Thank you so much.
Both the books. And of course, Nasreen, Munni Kavi's all the books. I've read most of them. I'm sure you've read.
Your book.
The legacy of Ritwik Ghatak.
The legacy of Ritwik Ghatak. I think the legacy of Ritwik Ghatak is primarily in the students of the FTII, in the little periods that he, about a year first and then at certain workshops in the subsequent years. It's in the work of, whether you like the work or not, it's in the work of Kumar Shahani and Manikal, and especially John Abraham, like I keep saying. As well as, when I speak to people like Syed Mirza or Adur Gopal Krishnan, and many others, Ketan Mehta, it's probably something for another time, because we've already, I guess, come to near the close of this session, so I can't go on about this. But it's in how much these filmmakers learned from him to take certain aspects of his craft and use them, maybe not directly, I mean, not a copy, but just understand his theories. Basically, it's his theories that they used in various ways in their cinema, and some continue to do so, especially in Kerala. Many people I met, it was quite amazing. So it's there. That's the legacy. The other legacy is something that I think is being created now, 50 years after his death, 50, 49, whatever it might be, after his death, because he didn't really exist outside of film schools and certain scholars and all of that, academics. He didn't exist for these years, really. Even before that, when he was making films, he was quite a non-entity in many ways, right? Not really, like I said, rejected, etc. But this year, my book is just a small part of it. I am aware of at least 8 to 10 other books that have come out in India. I'm aware of programs, events taking place across Bengal and the rest of India and abroad.
New York and London.
Yeah, and people talking about Ritwik Ghatak suddenly. So it's almost like these 50 years after his death, he was like a ghost, you know, he was like just a spirit floating around. But now it's almost like he's got that afterlife that you know, I'm not a believer or anything, but, you know, in terms of his work and what he left behind and what he taught, he was perhaps a better teacher than a filmmaker. I love his cinema.
Exactly.
That's not the point. But in terms of the legacy, he was a better teacher, is the legacy he's left behind.
I mentioned in the passing that both of them are the next of kin of the respective subjects that they wrote on. M.S. Swaminathan's wife is Priyambada's aunt, and Shamya is Ritwik Ghatak's grandnephew. Would I be right in saying that? ठीक है. Nasreen is the only odd person out in this panel because she has no family connections with Guru Dutt. But any questions for the three stalwarts?
People are still awake.
Yes.
No.
Not hungry.
No, don't worry. I'm hungry, so I want to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes.
Just bring the lights down so we can see if anyone...
Don't worry, there are not too many out there, but that's okay. We just want to see them.
Someone may have a question.
Yeah. এই আলোটা বন্ধ করে দেবেন দাদা
বন্ধ মানে একটু নিচে
একেবারে বন্ধ না
This is fine.
এটা নালে পুরো অন্ধকার মানে আর করি
এটা ঠিক আছে বোধহয় এটা ঠিক আছে
এটা তো গেল এটা তো পুরো অন্ধকার করলে বালাজি
কই না তাই তো
আচ্ছা এটাতে ছাড়ো এটা
ঠিক আছে
এটা ঠিক আছে
Yeah, questions.
একটা হাত তো উঠতে উঠতে নেবে গেল তো হাঁটু তো দে তো কেন মাইক দে এটা মাইক দে না এই যে সামনে
Hi, so my name is Jay and I'm not from Kolkata, I'm from Delhi. I was here for a wedding and I just saw like Nasreen ma'am is coming here, so I was like super excited to meet her. So like I was going through a very rough patch of life and I like I watched Pyasa like I think last year, and then this year I have been reading a lot of literature about Guru Dutt and your books were like really helpful. So you have been the bridge for me to connect with him in ways that I cannot explain to you. So it just helped me, you know, kind of overcome my issues, like a lot of them. Like I was telling this to my therapist that I read about Guru Dutt, and it helped me overcome my mental health issues. And she's like, how is it happening? And then it's like, it just comes from empathy in a way. So like, I don't have really a question for you. I just wanted to tell you like how much I love you for that. And it's just so amazing, the work, like all the things that you have, you know, you have put it out there in the world for people like me, like young people like me. Like, you know, when I tell people that I love Guru Dutt and I'm 23-year-old.
What's your question? Come to the question.
My question is, I don't have a question. I just wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to tell her that I love her so much. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to meet you.
That's very sweet of you.
And I think it's absolutely, I'm moved because in my work, I want to open doors and windows. I don't want to open the door and sit behind the door and close it to the subject. I want to open it to the world. And Guru Dutt, to me, was definitely an obsession. And I think what you recognize in him, and we were talking about being outsiders, Guru Dutt, in his performance, was so restrained. And if he was really appealing to the West, which he is in France, in America, wherever his films are seen, it was because of his very restrained personality. And that has connected to people, and that is timeless, because all of us have our problems and demons. And when we see a character like that, we empathize with him completely. And I feel, I'm very happy that you say all this. I felt that, and if I have communicated that in the work, then I've managed something sensible.
Absolutely. Great question, great answer. No, not a question, a great observation and great response. Sorry, yeah, please.
Excuse me. You can have a mic.
Nasreen ji, आपके लिए सवाल है. I've read virtually every book that you've curated, and one of the observations is that the format is questions and answers. It's conversational. And I've realized that most of these books I've been able to finish in a couple of days. Do you think this format has been very consciously selected in today's times when attention spans are very poor?
You see, the format comes from the fact that I've done documentaries before. In documentaries, you ask questions, and then in my documentaries, if you see any, I cut the answer. I did documentaries on, obviously, Guru Dutt, Lataji, and also Shah Rukh Khan. And I cut my questions out. But in a book, you need those questions because the question works like a cut. So you change the subject like Balaji does with a question. So I like this format. It looks like an interview. The difference between an interview and a conversation in a book is in the interview, you talk about the here and now. What are you doing this week? What is your next film? In a conversation, I was trying to make an autobiographical conversation. I spent 2 years with Rahman. It was a 3-year project. And over 3 years, we talk about different aspects. With Zakir Saab, it was the same thing. You allow them to reveal themselves slowly. And by asking questions, they're busy people, so you get something. And it is true, in India, it's very difficult to check facts. Fact-checking is very difficult. So at least, if you're interviewing Balaji, then at least you get something that close to the truth, because it's your lived reality. So that's Lataji, if she says something, it is close to her lived reality. If Ashaji said something about Lataji, it will be different. So the conversation allowed you a connection with the reader. I always wanted, like the young man said, to connect back to the reader. And people have said, the conversation format, I felt I was in the room.
Wow. Relatively underexplored, can be explored far more?
Yes, the access is difficult. Sometimes you find people don't trust you. So, I don't know, but they have to have time. And I've been very difficult about one thing. I always try and choose subjects where I think I can show 5 films of theirs each. So Wahida ji or Rahman or Gulzar Saab or Javed Saab, you have to show 5 films each and be proud of them. Not because they've had one film hit. So that is why today's cinema and today's people, very difficult to do a book of this kind.
We can take 2 more questions. Yeah, but maybe questions for Shamya and Priyambada.
Yes, I'm asking to Priyambada ma'am. Actually, I belong to, studied in IRI, Indian Agriculture Research.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's why I was very much correlated with your book, and that book was very informative. And that should be reach into different University of Agriculture, especially now even in IRI, even in BCKV here, in Kalyani, and another BHU and all those universities. But I think, and even I am right now working in Food Corporation of India. That is more, both are related, Indian Agricultural Institute and Food Corporation of India.
Both is legacies.
Yeah, ma'am.
Both completely
Food
legacies.
security started from MS Swaminathan sir. And we have personally met there in IRI. So I was very much touched with your book, ma'am. That was a great book, and that should be reached. And whole session should be on agriculture. Rather than film and agriculture, we should done a single session on agriculture, ma'am. That will help. Right now, even PM Modi sir also shifting from food security to nutrition security, ma'am. And even MS Swaminathan sir work on MS Foundation right now, ma'am,
in Chennai.
Yeah. So I just want to go there and work there. You have elaborated so much things in that book, ma'am. Even women empowerment,
Yes.
even rural village, ma'am. Those books are great, ma'am. And we are very much proud of MS Swaminathan, ma'am. Even after giving nutrition security right now, in the case of MS Modi, Prime Minister Modi. So both are very novel work, and in that time, as you were saying, Indira Gandhi was saying, no, just America ko bhagao, I don't want to see America, ma'am. So your great work, ma'am. Congratulations.
Thank
and
you.
hope it will reach to other people also, ma'am. And give at least one session on agriculture, ma'am, everywhere, ma'am.
No, you know, agriculture, I'll be very honest with
Yeah.
you. When people ask me, is this a book on agriculture? I always turn around and say, no, this is not a book on agriculture, because I'm not an agricultural scientist by training. I'm a historian by training and a social psychologist as well. What I wanted to talk about was the political reason behind a food problem, because people don't realize that food can also be very, very political and can be a weapon. Look at how America is politicizing food and access today. And agriculture is seen by many as a very boring subject, you know. And that is one thing I want to dispel. I don't think you can call agriculture a boring subject because, you know, without food, and today I say that with knowing for a fact that not many people want to get into agriculture and farmers don't want their children to be farmers, but I only have one question for them. Who's going to grow your food? Who is going to feed you? You don't want to look after the next generation farmers. How exactly are we going to eat? We can't eat concrete. We can't be eating our iPhones. We spend a lot of time on that. But that's not food. If M.S. Swaminathan's life taught me one thing, it was that food is the ultimate currency of life. You can live without almost anything in the world. Your tablets, your books even. And I say this at one of the most, you know, phenomenal literary festivals in India, in India's literary calendar. But you certainly can't live without food. And food and films, those are two things which people partake of, and it cuts through the classes. Whether rich, poor, everybody aspires to go and, you know, see a film and then enjoy it with some food. Food becomes very, very important. But then food, the security, you know, agriculture, which is so important and seminal to our economy, really has been ignored a lot. I mean, I would love to go to all your agricultural universities once I'm done with this entire, you know, Lit Fest, you know, things which come up. But thank you very much. I mean, if the book has reached you and, you know, the messaging has gone through, then like Nasreen said, that, you know you've done something right and you've taken a right turn somewhere. Yes, there were two of his legacies. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Okay.
One last question for Priyambada. Why is it taking so long for a biography on the great man?
You know why? I'll tell you why. Because there were books written on the lysine content of wheat, but very little written about his life. I suspect certain things have to happen at a certain time. You know, we stumble into bigger things without realizing it. This was a lockdown project. I live in Singapore, and we were shut out from the world. So I think, driving my husband mad, who's sitting over there, and we've got 3 young children, and he's finally said, instead of chewing my brains, why don't you do what you do best, which is writing. And I caught a tweet by him in 2020 where he talked about, 20 and 21, he talked about the great migration which was happening with the migrants with their lives strapped on their backs. He said, this is not the India we gave up so much for, and this is not the India we strove so much for. And that is when I realized that his life was worth retelling. He was 96 at that time and still active on X. For me, that was a turning point, and I said that I'd read enough about him and his social and his scientific experiments, but very little about the man behind it. So this is a human story more than an agricultural one. I have no idea. You've got to ask them. Perhaps they were waiting for me.
Exactly.
Perhaps ladies always do it.
Yeah. Tell me, there's already a biopic on the father of the White Revolution.
Yes, Verghese.
When are we going to
suspect? Troublingly, that film hasn't had. It's been made, but it hasn't had takers. You know, it's lying with. I know the studio which has done it. They haven't been able to sell it.
What about a biopic on the father of the Green Revolution?
We're talking about it. I'm just hoping they don't bring out Salman Khan to dance in the fields. So I'm trying to, they're trying to, yes, they do. And they, you know, I've had a lot of interest from both the South Indian film industry and Bollywood as well. And I'm only going to give it to somebody who I know is not going to turn fact into fiction. They can make it interesting. We're not looking at a documentary. We're looking at something which will, you know, entertain and educate at the same time. But straddling those two worlds can be a little difficult. But yes, we are looking at it. No more questions. Is there anything on Ghatak? Shop ghumiye poreche.
No, boigulo ache. Books are available tomorrow for the authors to sign. You know, coming from as diverse fields as they did, there's one thing that connected all 3 of them. There is a common love for Rabindranath Tagore. All 3 of them, right? M.S. Swaminathan believed in it, and Ghatak and Dutt, obviously the Calcutta connection. So I think that's a great thing to believe in. That's a great thing.
For him, Akla Cholure was very, very seminal because he said that he walked. And in fact, it was Mrs. Gandhi's favorite hymn from Shantiniketan when she was with Kabi Guru. And I think for many people, and you know, I think for both Ghatak and Dutt, Akla Cholure would ring a huge bell because a lot of times in life we walk very lonely roads, and those lonely paths sometimes either define or is our unmaking, whatever we wish to make of it. And I think that is probably what, you know, the greats, the Shotobarsho that we are celebrating of these 3 seminal, huge figures tells us that life is what you make of it.
All 3 of them believed in that one great person, Rabindranath Tagore. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the panelists for your great insights.
Thank you, Balaji. Nasreen, what an honor. Jomo, thank you.
It's an honor, Nasreen, to have you here.
I must say I was absolutely thrilled and intrigued by what you were saying.
Thank you,
I'm
Nasreen.
going
That's a
to get
huge
your
honor.
book because
I take that with
I
great
feel
humility.
so ignorant. And then you think, to be honest, films are not so important. Not really. And today, the popcorn is
Films
better
are.
than
I'll tell
the
you
movie.
why. I'll tell you why films are. Because they're a leap of faith. And you want to let your mind wander. I think if we focus too much on our problems, we'd be bipolar in many, many ways. More ways than one, even those, catalogued and non-catalogued. But, a flight of fantasy is very important, as is food security on your plate. But when they both meet together, as they do on this plane, then that's when magic really happens. Thank you, Kolkata. You've been exemplary.
Thank you. Good night.